little videos right now to get the ball rolling, as well as conducting our ABT game show here with important categories of painful and, shocking if-thens, Dobzhansky's that bite, and hollow therefores. Okay. So, yeah, here's a couple of videos that we want to share. The first one is kind of nice because we've done really good work with Emory University for the last 3 years. Next month getting ready to start. No, at the end of this month we're starting the fourth year in a row of teaching the ABT course there. And this is still the long version of the course, the 10 1-hour sessions that they've turned it into a university course. It's part of the curriculum. So let's show this little video. How long is it, Matthew? 3 minutes?
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, this gives you some idea of where we are with the training these days. So I'll stop sharing. You can take that away. Yeah, go for it.
Will do. And here we go.
Hello there. For the past 4 years, we've been conducting communications training for clinical and translational research students in the Master of Science in Clinical Research and Certificate Program in Translational Science at Emory University using the ABT and but therefore framework. This is a technique and body of knowledge developed by scientist turned filmmaker Dr. Randy Olson and his group over the past decade, working with a wide range of government agencies and public health organizations. The training is based on Dr. Olson's 12 books on science communication. They have now produced a textbook for the course, The Narrative Gym for Medicine, which includes a foreword written by our own Dr. Henry Blumberg, professor of infectious diseases at the Emory University School of Medicine.
4 years ago, I heard Randy Olson on a podcast, and so I reached out to him about collaborating on scientific communications training for our junior investigators who are pursuing careers as clinical investigators and translational scientists. The ABT is really a terrific way of our young investigators communicating complex scientific findings in a focused, concise, and understandable way. The course has exceeded our expectations and has really been fantastic, and we've incorporated it into our core curriculum.
The student evaluations for the course have been consistently excellent. Here's a few thoughts from some past participants.
So I think in the beginning, I was probably a little bit confused about where we were going with the different sort of the ABT, but then it began to make sense, especially as we started, reviewing other people's proposals and their submissions and trying to look at, okay, what are they really trying to say?
What I really liked about this course was the structure it gives, because I'm an engineer with a background, right? I like when there's a recipe.
It really helps you kind of develop your elevator pitch, which in my experience, I've found to be very helpful. The ABT is something that I've used formally, and it's also something I almost use now just because of the practice I had with it during the course to really do things. It's almost subconscious now.
So ABT was a great course that I enjoyed a lot, and I learned a lot about communication from the course. But I suck at oral communication. Therefore, I need to work on my ABT.
Perhaps the most telling piece of commentary yet from the student evaluations is one student who said, "The only thing wrong with this course is that it isn't being taught to every medical student in the country."
Okie dokie, and so that, and now we've got one other little video to share with you. This one's only a minute long, very quick and to the point. And this is both these things are zero budget projects, but they're kind of used for our training. This one's with the group at FAA and their Aviation Research Center in New Jersey. We've been working with for 4 years. Really wonderful group that's turning into one of our major kind of incubators for how to do this narrative training. So you can let that one roll. And again, this is cheapo, low budget animation, but gets the point across, I think. So here's an example of how we use the ABT or and but therefore narrative framework at FAA's William J. Hughes Technical Center for Advanced Aerospace. Our assistant administrator for NextGen said he needed presentations of our major research accomplishments. As a part of this assignment, we came up with the idea of 1-minute videos called Research to Reality. This is where we turned to the ABT narrative framework to help us write a script that was narratively structured, concise, and compelling. The ABT enabled us to draw on the structure of good storytelling, presenting the work as a journey within the 1-minute time. We produced the videos, brought them back to our assistant administrator, and voila, they turned out to be just the 1-minute presentations he was looking for. The ABT was the key ingredient that made it all work effectively. Okie dokie. And so now a little bit more presentation for me, especially since we're coming back here, but sow a few more seeds here for discussion. And what I want to do now is, let's see here. I got to go back to sharing. Okay. And there, and here we go. There, and there, and there, and there. Is that back to normal, Matthew?
Looking good.
Okay. So those are the two videos that we've done. And then this is what we got going on about 6 weeks ago that has turned into a lot of fun. And many of you are familiar with our the narrative metrics, and especially the narrative index, the butt to end ratio. This is something for 10 years I've been cultivating. In the last 5 years, Matthew teamed up with me, and really we've gotten to the point now where we've got a lot of confidence in it. Really is a very simple, two simple indices, the butt to end ratio and the end frequency. Then we began to look at large sample sizes, 25 speeches and essays by different individuals, and kind of starting to establish some of these reference points as we're carving out this body of knowledge that does not exist, number one. Number two, the vast majority of all these communications people don't understand it, so they don't find it interesting. I mean, we're off in our own little realm here, but among us, we seem to think it's pretty cool. And so this is a series of Substack posts we've done for the last month and a half, one after another. We call it the narrative knockdown. First off, are a couple of reference values there. The New York Times, you can see that for their columnists, they average about a 30. They're way up there. They're professional editorial writers. They draw on a lot of narrative strength. They have a lot of ABT in there, and you can quantify it in this butt to end ratio. We then did we did Science Magazine. No, we did some editorials from several different publications. And scientists, not surprisingly, are way down there. They don't draw on narrative structure much at all. I've known this for 30 years. That's part of 40 years, why I got drawn into this topic of how scientists are so bad at communication. They don't tap into this. Then we set to work looking at different sorts of people. And there's a publication I've had 5 articles in since the pandemic started called MedPage. And we did their editorial section in general, and it scored pretty low. But then there's their editor-in-chief is a doctor named Jeremy Faust, and he has his own column called The Faust Files. And just out of curiosity, Liz in particular has really become our specialist in doing all these numbers. And she dug up 25 of his editorials, and lo and behold, his value shot through the roof. Way up, averaging 47. And in fact, did we do 50 there because of his small sample sizes on that one? We might have some of the ones that
we did 50 but not for him.
Okay. Yeah.
His were more in the word count.
Yeah. When a lot of them were less than 1,000 words, we cranked it up to double the sample size to kind of compensate for that. But that was a shocker. And the wonderful thing that happened there was that we did the Substack post. Matthew tweeted it out and put it on Substack, and it caught the attention of Dr. Faust. And then he started retweeting a bunch of funny things about it. He was a really good sport. So our dream scenario is that we're going to find a way to drag him into this Wednesday discussion somewhere in the next month or two. I promise you we'll have him as one of our spotlight guests. He clearly is just a fireball. And the bottom line is that all of his essays are about public health, and he's really fired up, and he draws on ABT structure to argue, here's the problem. We're not doing this, but we're missing this. Therefore, we need to do this. And you could see how tightly he ratchets the problem solution dynamic. As opposed to the next two people, Richard Horton is the editor of The Lancet. Our buddy Steve Kearns suggested I take a look at him, and then Holden Thorpe's the editor of Science. I think both of them are really restrained in terms of the formality of what they can editorialize inside their publications there, and so they don't really draw on a lot of fire and brimstone. But then lo and behold, Paul Krugman, who was on last night on Lawrence O'Donnell, Nobel Prize winning economist and columnist in the New York Times, he too shoots way up there. And trust me, 10 years of doing this stuff, these are true anomalies. Nobody's come close to that sort of average. And it turns out he actually beat Faust. So he's up there at 49 average, I think, and 47 for Faust. Maureen Dowd, who most of you probably know, is much more restrained. What these two metrics are beginning to give us is this little bit of a way to paint a portrait of the style of communication of these individuals. And you see that Maureen Dowd is not fire and brimstone. But she's got really deep character work and she's very good at setup. And Liz is really developing a deeper, nuanced feel for the three elements of agreement, contradiction, and consequence and how these people communicate. And then last week we did RFK Jr. And he's very similar to Mark Morano, who we had as a spotlight guest here a few months ago in this discussion. And both of them are much more in the end-to-end realm. They're just spewing. It's the Gish Gallop that we also talked a lot about. We had Jeannie Scott came and join us. It's this style of communication which converges on Steve Bannon's flood the zone with shit, which is just spewing and spewing and spewing. And when people are doing that, they don't have the ability to craft very much narrative structure. And it means that they're not communicating at a very deep level. They're not changing hearts and minds. They're just spewing. Then this past week, we did something that I actually began to document 10 years ago. And again, why the political world finds none of this interesting. Someday somebody's going to come across it. Dave Gold, my co-author for the politics version of the Narrative Gym, totally got it, but he just tried to share it with some of his veteran colleagues as Democratic strategists, and he just said they're too shallow in their thinking. They're running all the time. Anybody involved in the politics world, they can't really find the time to think deeply like this. But this is a really, I think, potentially powerful factoid to know about Donald Trump, which is he has two modes of communication, and it's clear as day. And Liz can tell you a lot more detail about this because she just did all the metrics last week. She found 10 speeches each, 10 of which that are him shooting from the hip, out talking to, shouting at his base. The nights when he goes crazy with his speeches that he's just making up off the top of his head. And he shoots way up there for ABT content. He's stimulating these brains. He's firing everybody up. By the way, the January 6th speech was at 26, also way up there. You can see averages at 30. Then when it comes time to give the State of the Union or the UN address or these things that are very much more restrained, he probably has Stephen Miller and a few other speechwriters write those, and they don't have any narrative intuition. And all they know how to do is just put together and boring junk. So I don't know. We're still learning as we go along in terms of the value of this, but that's more stuff for discussion. And now the last little bit I want to present here, and this is now jumping up to the bigger picture, and this is setting the tone for the next, because we'll be doing this every week for the rest of the year. We did it for the first half of the year, took July off, and now the next 5 months. Two main themes for us to be hitting over and over again. The first of which is that the ABT is more than just a communications tool. We're going to have 3 spotlight guests in the next 3 weeks that we're lining up that will talk to that. And we had John Room a couple months ago from the World Bank, who that was exactly his message, is that he's been working with the ABT for 3 years. And when I talked to him last spring, when I was doing the work out there in DC at the World Bank, he said he's using the ABT with the Asia Investment Bank folks as a leadership tool, far more than just communication. And that's something for us to talk about. And then this bigger picture desensitization. So I just want to say a few things about that, and then we'll open it up for anybody and everybody to talk about anything. So this is the end of the intro, but here's the deal. In another month and a half, I turn 70, and I'm getting to the point now where I'm just speaking my mind on a lot of things. And this is an editorial I published in the LA Times 23 years ago. It's about this term, shifting baselines, which was coined in the 1990s in the fisheries world. My good friend, Jeremy Jackson, recruited me for a communications campaign about ocean conservation. And he began to kind of lobby me for this term and saying, don't you think this is more than just something for the oceans? This term, shifting baselines, applies to everything in our lives. And I wrote this editorial, sent it into the LA Times. To their credit, the editors rewrote about a third of it and punched it up and made it that much better. They added a lot of these things in that second paragraph right there. And the editorial got a lot of traction. Not only that, you can search shifting baselines now and see the Wikipedia page, and it mentions this editorial. And it's grown. There were no mentions of it on the internet previous to November 2002, other than the fisheries biologist paper where he coined the term, but at that point it was just sitting in the fisheries world. That's what so much of this stuff is so important. You've got to take these things. It's the Christopher Lochhead thing: name it, frame it, and claim it. And that's basically what we did with shifting baselines. Was we claimed this concept with this term. It's very powerful. Interestingly, a year or two later, another broader term emerged, which was the new normal. And it's important to look at the difference between those two because the new normal is broader, it's more visceral, everybody can pick it up more immediately, but it's nowhere near as powerful because it doesn't have this term baseline. The baseline is a really specific term from the world of analytical thought and science. And as it says there, shifting baselines are the chronic, slow, hard to notice changes in things. And this is one of the themes that I really would like for us to get deeper into in these discussions in the next few months because it's what really interests me, which is the nightmare that we live in today in our society that we know is all around us. And here's one slice of it, which is just, a week or two ago, looking at the front page of USA Today. And there's the important news at the top, number one in the headlines. Pamela Anderson, Liam Neeson address dating rumors. I mean, everybody needs to be reading about that. And then at the bottom of the list is this other little aside. Oh, yeah, by the way, it was a deadly day in the US. Mass shootings hit several cities. How in the world did this society ever get to this point? I did not grow up in this world. And here's the data to show the world that I grew up in. And a lot of you can relate to this, I'm sure. Take a look at 1965. If you're my age, you remember when the sniper climbed up in the tower at the University of Texas and shot, I think, about 15 or so people. And that the whole nation stopped dead. And the television shows were interrupted. We interrupt this broadcast to tell you about what's going on at University of Texas. It was a mass shooting like no one had ever seen before. And there didn't used to be many of these things. But look at how that has grown now. And along with it is this desensitization where now it's just part of the fabric of America and people just, they don't respond to it. And how does this relate to the ABT? Well, it's straight out of what we are discerning. And this is, especially Matthews kind of helped pull this together. He's really the first guy about 3 years ago who realized this heaven and hell dynamic. And then our friends in the UK who spoke to us last spring kind of morphed that into their DNA tool, which is really, really powerful. And we use that a lot now. And it's this idea of dream, nightmare, action. And it's looking at the three ABT elements, which are just the agreement, contradiction, and consequence, the three fundamental forces of everything. This is why I say narrative is everything. ABT is everything. It's these three forces that in the 1700s, the philosophers figured it out. And what we've done the last century is bury it under a ton of noise. But this simple dynamic, and this is what we teach in the training now, is that you want to try and craft your narrative using this ABT model with the three things. You want to eventually set us up with a really big dream. So you start off with the ordinary world, and then you tell us why this topic that you're working on is so important. You build the dream, you get people's emotions way up there, like, oh my goodness, this is the world I want to live in. And then you hit them, you try and maximize this contrast, dropping them from way up high all the way down with the butt bomb into this trench here. And it's in that contrast, the narrative contrast, that you actually activate the brains, you get a response. And if you've done a good job of it, then that will translate into action. And therefore, now we're going to respond to this nightmare by doing this. That's how it's supposed to work. This is what we try and work with people, trying pushing them. We were just in the thick of this yesterday with the folks at FAA. It's really powerful. But here's the picture of where we are nowadays in this society, sadly, tragically, I think, and analytically, which is nowadays people aren't talking about very big dreams. They've given up on so much. You're seeing it on a daily basis. People are just not talking the way they used to. I mean, we one of the topics, Peter Coogan, the member we talked a little bit last spring about the fairness doctrine. That was a dream that's just been thrown in the trash can. So many of these things, the dreams are so small nowadays, and as a result, we can remember they're grayed out how big and small big these things used to be. But now you get a mass shooting, it's nowhere near the nightmare that it once was, and as a result, the actions that result from it are nowhere near. And so what happens? In Congress, they talk about maybe we should regulate bump stocks, and that's about it, or something really trivial. It just ain't what it used to be. And that is my little sermon to kind of get the ball rolling for the next 5 months as we talk about these things. And so I will stop sharing. And I know there's lots of people that will have lots of things to say on this topic. And, Peter, are you there? I mean, Do you agree with the fairness doctrine? That was a dream that is just tossed to the wayside, right? You're muted right now. You got anything to say?
Sure. It was the law. It
Yeah.
was a fear in the hearts of investors that putting cash in radio or TV locally, uh, instead of giving you a voice, bound you legally to offer air of alternative voices. And while it was almost never enforced, even during its heydays, it certainly was a cause célèbre for funders of Ronald Reagan, who pulled the plug on Federal Communications Commission enforcement of um, bias communication on the public airways. Let's not forget that this is corporate capitalism at its worst. The divvying up of the airwaves, the electromagnetic communication ability that's open to any human with a battery, it was regulated by the government because it was a limited resource. If you consider what kind of FM and AM radio stations could bring down those signals. And also, it was a clear threat to national security when you had Nazi propaganda generated from Munich able to be heard worldwide very cheaply. And so we had that
And
long
so
history.
where is the
Oh,
memory of
sorry.
it today? What's left of, does anybody in the working world today even know what the fairness doctrine was? And, when you brought that up a few months ago, I remember my buddy Greg, the filmmaker, he knew what it was because he'd worked on a project about it. But other than that, it's all just kicked to the wayside. The baselines have shifted.
Well, it's true, but not accidentally. Through a concerted investment effort, starting with the American Chamber of Commerce hiring uh, Justice Powell, who would later become Justice Powell, to write a memo about how are we going to get win again in courts when juries are finding factually that we've done wrong. They're listening to doctors who say DDT causes cancer. And so a plan was put in place to erode the effectiveness of expertise in persuading our
Yeah, but I think
counsel.
I would offer up 50-50. It's active and passive. I think that the information era and explosion has also added a passive element where people are just so inundated, swamped, they've lost track of issues and things like that. Let
It
me
is
ask you.
true, but if I may, just
Yeah,
one last thing about
yeah,
that. Is that's because it's no longer broadcast one to many. It's now allegedly many to all, when in fact the algorithm really keeps those individual voices from doing anything uh, to all.
yeah.
And everyone is bombarded. It's more like all against you and your reality. That's what has changed in the curation of these things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, Karen, welcome back. Have we solved the climate dilemma? You want to share with us what
Oh
your
yeah, buried the headline. We're good now. Everything's fixed.
climate's fixed? Okay, good.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Just
Yeah,
so everybody knows, Karen is in Portland and she heads up a climate action. How would you describe it?
it's a private foundation, just a little itty bitty one.
Okay.
And we just closed a third funding opportunity. So we have like 92 letters of inquiry in our queue, which is really awesome. And it was a soft close, so I expect to get more applications coming in as well. So it's very overwhelming, both just administratively and conceptually, because there's all of these amazing projects that are out there. Even in our tiny little slice of this tiny little problem. Anyway, so it's a lot, but it's very inspiring. And I think this question that I'm kind of just cogitating on and about to put in the chat is like, how are you all dealing with the bombardment of concepts, and how are you making sense of all of this in terms of prioritization, and even using our friend the ABT to make sense of things for yourself, maybe.
And on that topic, Charles, if you're up for tossing a few comments, one of the things in the last month that hit me the hardest was John Oliver did a segment about AI slop that I'd never had my eyes open to that. And he began with this poor woman telling about how much she's loved Pinterest over the years, and that now 80% of the stuff on Pinterest is AI slop. And it's just, all these things are losing their effectiveness. Charles, we hold you responsible for this world of artificial intelligence.
Fix it, Charles.
Fix it, Charles.
Absolutely,
Exactly.
yeah. No, it is fixed. It's just getting better and better. That's
Oh, there we go. Here comes a proponent.
yeah.
You got any thoughts on AI slop?
I mean, it is a huge issue, and I see this, for example, like we were doing a bunch of grants as Karen, I was managing some grant applications, and the whole percentage of them have been written with LLMs. And once in a while, somebody leaves the prompt in when they enter their grant request, and then they used LLM, but the rest of them, you just don't know what you're getting, if you're getting a person's voice or if you're getting something they just clicked on. And yeah, no, it's just big problems. And
where is it leading to?
well, so have I spoken about my yellow jacket analogy in this context?
No, go for it. That's what this place is for.
Okay, so yellow jackets, they live in the ground. If they have a nest in the ground, if you bury that nest, they will dig their way out because they know if it's dark, you dig till it's light, and then they're okay. But if you put a glass bowl over the entrance to the nest, they will just fly into that glass bowl over and over until they die of hunger and starvation, because nothing in their neural evolution has prepared them for this situation. And they're not stupid. It's just that they have a structural incapacity to deal with this situation. And they will never solve the problem of the glass bowl because their brains just have fundamental limitations. Mm-hmm. And as species, we all face this. And we need to be aware that humans, we face fundamental limitations in our neural development. And there are certain things we do not have the means to deal with. So this is my cosmic Dobzhansky, if you like, is it all comes down to structural incompetencies caused by evolution. And while we're not any better than yellow jackets, the good news is we're no worse either, right? We're just another species in a jam.
Julie, you had a comment?
Yeah, to just follow up on that, and this goes back to what was in the video about you're reading the New York Times and there's, starvation in Gaza, and then right below it is, oh, here's an easy recipe that you can cook tonight. So it's that whiplash that your brain is going through. And I think this, is interesting thinking about evolutionarily about our cognitive, we're going to shy away from the painful stuff, right? So it's like, it's so painful to read. It's so painful that what's going on in multiple areas that, you see that easier thing to read. Oh, here's a travel thing on Italy. Immediately you're just drawn to it. And, that's just avoiding pain. And so I've really started to pay attention when I go through the headlines, like what is happening inside me? Like, and then you have to really say, no, this is important. I need to read this painful stuff. But this is where I think the messaging, the clear, concise, compelling is so important, because if the painful stuff is poorly written, it's even harder to absorb it.
And it just becomes noise, like everything else. Charles, going back to the yellow jackets, does that mean then that we are the yellow jackets and AI is has put the glass bowl over us?
Well, I think in multiple senses, like climate change is an example of something that requires a response that potentially we as a species or as a society are not capable of mustering, right? So yes, absolutely, we have fundamental limitations in our cognitive abilities, both individually and as a superorganism. And so we are, in a sense, exactly analogous to the yellow jackets. But I'd like to mention something that Julie brought up, because it highlights for me, I think, for me, the ABT more and more comes down to the one thing is it helps clarify, why should I care? And that's really what it's doing. And this is what you said, Julie, that if you are going to say something painful, you need to make clear this matters. This is why the reader should care. And ultimately, more and more with ABT, I find my whole goal, I'm trying to communicate to someone, why should they care about this next slide, this next 20 minutes, this next sentence, this next whatever.
Well, and what we deal with endlessly with the scientists, and I dealt with in my science career, is this arrogance of assuming everybody cares with what you care about. And it's just a blindness. And I had the blindness as a scientist, Well, everybody's interested in the work. No, nobody's interested in it. And you've got to come down from your pedestal and make the case. And God, that is just over and over again is the unwillingness to come down and make the case. Mike Strauss, did you want to say something about all the proposals you've been reading?
Yeah, as I said, I just went through 75 proposals. One of the things I'm thinking of,
And what were these proposals for?
they were for several USDA programs
Hmm.
that have not been canceled. But Charles, one of the things that I was thinking as I went through those is that the combined 75 proposals in this one program, annually, I've done this for several years. We started out at about 30 or 40 across them. Last year we had probably about 50, and then all of a sudden this year we had 75. And I would say that the 75, I would say 2/3 of them weren't even worth looking at. And I found myself wondering how many of these are done by AI.
God.
The thing that really stood out for us, I've showed Matthew and Liz and Randy, is that the best one of all 75 was written by someone who I know wrote it herself because I know the researcher. And what made it so good was it answered right up front exactly what you're saying. It told people why they should care. And it was very clear. But I think that's something that the AI, at least the people using AI to write proposals, haven't figured out. And I think this is a problem I was reading the other day in reviewing papers in journals. The journals are just getting swamped with AI generated papers. And eventually you're going to have people who are going to say, we're not going to waste our time reviewing all these. I'm going to have troubles getting.
They're going to use AI to review them, and this happens too.
Yeah.
Like I was involved in reviewing papers for a conference, and I was an area chair, so I have to look at the reviewers' comments, and some of them, it was clear they had just used an LLM to generate their review. So you're having LLM generated papers and LLM generated reviews, and this is happening across the domain, right? Across multiple domains.
That episode of South Park came true. Oh my God, that episode of South Park came true.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
Exactly right. They turn in their essays, and then which one of the teachers, Mr. Whoever it is,
Mr. Garrison,
Mr. Garrison feeds them all to
Garrison.
ChatGPT.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Hey, Peter, going back to you. I mean, you're our closest connection to Hollywood folks. I don't have Greg here today, but are you picking up that signal in Hollywood and the entertainment industry that AI is just must be generating millions of that thing that John Oliver did that was so distressing. There was two parts to it. There was the sad woman saying that for so many years she loved Pinterest because there was a whole thing in there where people would post pictures of their backyards and she loved to look at all those things. And now 80% of those pictures are coming from AI. And then he cut to this schmuck on YouTube with his video about how to go viral. Have AI generate 1,000 images for you, put them all on Pinterest. And if even one of those goes viral, then you'll make a fortune. And that's the machine that's just cranking out this stuff. And that has to be going on in Hollywood now. I wonder if the DGA and registering screenplays has suddenly skyrocketed with the number of screenplays, because that was always an indicator. Back when I was in film school, it was like 50,000 a year. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just happening at the level of a creator deciding, oh, I got to be done. Let me just run this through. And then maybe the readers are running, defense. It's that if it doesn't matter to most people that it's crap. Most of the stuff that was developed before was crap. And one of the things about AI slop is that it's grammatical and punctuated. And the kinds of errors that humans make that can be alienating aren't in it, but the kinds of things that humans do to interest other humans in human and humanity are gone entirely. And
Well, and
the
okay, so to that point, to bring it into ABT land, we color code the three elements: the setup, the problem, and the actions. Um, and we have found in our journey, Matthew and I in particular, 5 years of running the course 42 times and all these things. In the beginning, we thought all three elements were created equal. Nowadays, we realize it's that blue material, it's the setup, it's the context, it's the framing. That's the really, really hard part. And I think that that's what we sense with AI right now. And maybe Charles, see if you agree with that, is that AI is really good with the problem and the actions, but the stumbling block for it is the context, um, the setup. And is that not sort of what you're talking about?
Well, I haven't thought in those terms about it, so I'm
Oh,
uninformed.
shucks. Because I mean, I would guess that it's easy for AI to write a screenplay that's a whole bunch of actions and consequences. People just on the run, cops and robbers, but actually doing something that's got a theme to it and a deeper dimension. Hey, Andy, how you doing, man?
Well, thank you. Good to be back. Thanks
Yeah,
for
glad you
reconvening
could
us.
join us. Yeah.
I'd like to add two sort of slight counterpoints and, as such, perhaps two notes of semi-optimism. I can report in one corner of the economy, at least, that there is a real aversion to AI, and that is my wife is a grant writer for many arts organizations, and she and her clients, I think, have a very high opinion of their own human-generated narratives about their work. And they are all completely opposed to using AI on grounds that, well, I don't want my truth, my real results that a knowledgeable human has constructed. I don't want that put out into the public model for other organizations or other grant writers to steal. So it's the very publicness or the very idea that these models are trained on everything on the internet that keeps, at least in the corner of the economy that is arts funding, keeps a lot of people really averse to AI. So that's one thing. There's some holdouts, but another thing I wanted to pass along is I do think that the ABT can stand as a stalwart and kind of a now more than ever tool. And here's what I mean. I think one of the most penetrating and true criticisms of AI, Randy, since you have the narrative gym and I work as a fitness trainer, one of the most penetrating criticisms I've heard of AI is, the weights in the weight room really don't need to be moved. And using AI is like using a forklift to move the weights in the weight room. What matters is not that the weights get moved up and down or side to side or whatever. What matters is what happens within you when you move the weights.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that sort of throwback reliance on, I want to get strong. I want to get adept at storytelling, what have you. I think that may be sort of the killer app or the way that ABT sort of stands out in this otherwise depressing world.
Isn't that kind of like the idea of people using GPS so much in their neighborhood they no longer can walk down the street and find their local grocery store or something without the GPS?
Right, makes you stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no muscles are getting
Right.
developed.
But I would argue that we have evolved to use our brains as little as possible. There was a neat article about this recently that actually it doesn't take more calories to think hard about something because so much of our brain, 95%, is rolling anyway. But shaving off that calorie expenditure at some point was important for our survival. And so our brain has found ways to convince itself that it gets tired if it thinks too hard. We have evolved to be lazy. And so it's sometimes hard to convince people to work hard for the importance, Andy, of what happens inside us because we've evolved the other way. Right. And so here we are fighting our structural limitations yet again.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people hate the weight room. So, some people never We'll never do it.
Yeah. Let me call on a couple of other of our veterans. And Park, are you there? Do you want to? You're more of a AI optimist, aren't you? And you want to catch us up on what's been happening in AI land for you in the business world?
Well, yeah. And so since I was here last, hello, everyone. Good to see you again. Hope your summer's going well. We have launched our Story Cycle Genie, which is a closed platform that we've built, but it uses AI to generate brand story strategy, marketing strategy, and then content based off of that brand story, all locked down. It doesn't hallucinate like you get in general AI. And what it essentially does is in the branding world, and I've been using my story cycle system for 20 years, and it's very effective, but it's really hard to pull off. And it can be a 4 to 6 month process to do all the discovery and due diligence, and then the brainstorming and sitting down with the creative retreats, blah, 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 blah. With the Story Cycle Genie, it's taken us about 2 years to build it, and the prompt engineering we've already done in it, that now you can do that same process in about 2 hours. And I've run 80 brands through it in our development phase. Our goal was to get them 80% of the way there, and then they could come in and fill in the rest of it, that last 20%, to really dial in their overall brand narrative strategy and so forth. And we're finding it's actually, they're telling us it's getting them 90 to 95% of the way there. So it's doing this thinking, it's providing, validates what they're already doing well. It highlights gaps, missed opportunities in their communications, and ultimately actually provides inspiring insights and new, different ways to tell that story. So this is, for me anyways, and we launched it 3 weeks ago. We have about 30 users on it, and they're raving about it because it is saving them so much time that they can get their products to market faster and whatever. And it's not replacing their own voice and their own storytelling, because we've got, story structures built into it. So it's writing some pretty good content. But the really good ones are going in then and taking that content and bringing 100% of their energy to fine tune that last 10% of what the AI did not get right. But because it's built on this closed system that no one else can see it, other AI agents can't see it out there, but we are using Claude and ChatGPT and Perplexity, I think, in there for reasoning models, writing models, and so forth. And so we've had tremendous success with the Genie. And Charles, you had seen a little bit of, or we talked about it on Randy's podcast. And one of your questions was it'll grade your website. You'll go in and it'll follow our 10-step story cycle system and actually give you a 14-point grading on how well you're doing, from A+ to an F-. And it will, you had asked back then, Charles, yes, but will it actually show me where that is happening, where I'm falling down or where I'm doing really well? And it will. It will go in, do that complete audit and go, here you go. And then you go in as the humanoid and you tweak it. You refine it. You said, no, this isn't quite right. Probably because you're not saying it quite right on your content and whatever. But it gives you the prompts then to go in and fix that stuff so you can refine that brand story. And then everything else you build off of that, from marketing strategy to content, uses story structures to create that. But it's all based on your story that you've built with inside the Genie. So I am bullish on it. It is working very, very well to save people. Whether it used to take months, now they can do it in minutes.
Excellent. And Doug, how bullish are you on AI these days? and can you give us a little update also on what Patrick's up to? He wasn't able to join us today, but Patrick's Doug's law colleague and is really become a major national expert, I think, on in law.
Yeah,
he's publishing articles.
He's publishing. He's got a Substack. He's all things AI, and I think he's really positioning himself, which is great. I'm not bullish, and I'd like to come at this from a different angle, which is the angle of a creative person, an artist, and specifically in the music realm, because I'll tell you a quick story, which is I have a client. And he writes these beautiful poems, and he found an AI platform that can take these songs, lyrics that he's written, and actually turn them into full-fledged songs with instruments and vocals and everything else. And I gave it to my 21-year-old son who hates AI with the passions of 1,000 suns. He's also on the spectrum, um, and I was like, Nate, you're not going to believe this. My client, who's on the spectrum, he's written me like 20 of these songs, and he keeps sending them to me. And he played one of them for about a minute, and he looked up to me and goes, Dad, I hate to say it, but I think you made a grave mistake getting this one out of prison. Um, but and so just for the fun of it, went into AI because I write songs, and I said, "This is a song I want to write," and just to see, and it was so trite, and it was just so cheesy and so basic and so surface level. And then I saw a little TikTok with Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin's world famous producer, and
Yes.
he says, "Here's why I'm not worried about AI taking over in the creative space." He said, "Because I gravitate to art with a point of view. That's what's interesting to me about art is the artist's point of view, and AI has none." And he said, if you look at all the AI developers, they would all agree that their goal is to be able to give the same data set that AI can digest and get the same output from each AI platform. And if you're doing that, it's very robotic, and it's not art, it's something different. And so at least in that space, I'm not too worried about the AI overlords kicking the artists and the painters and everything else out of there. Not yet, anyway. I'm sure that point of view is coming 5, 10 years down, 2 years down the road. I don't know, 10 minutes down the road.
All right, we got 9 minutes left here because we always trim these things off right at the hour because we got actually our Florida Department of Environmental Protection group we got to work with. But yeah, Peter, jump in.
So in art, as in business, bad art will flourish under AI, and cheap art will be even cheaper. And so people buying cheap art are going to be very pleased. And it's very similar to a person seeking legal advice. They're going to get terrible legal advice, but very cheaply from AI lawyers, and terrible health advice from AI physicians. And AI generally is a consumer-ended focused product that wants to please its consumer. And it will by giving them what they want to hear, which is lies and pablum. And it's the wealthy people at the very top who are going to reserve private communication, as Andy Reynolds points out, secret sauce arts advice that they never discuss in public, where a computer might read it. And it's, again, the oligarchs who've wrecked the world who are going to benefit the most from preserving their little private parks of experts that they keep in-house.
Well, on a similar note, Eric, are you there? You typed in what was that? Can you tell us about that book? What AI snake oil?
Yeah, yes, I'm reading it right now, and it's really interesting because it makes a clear distinction between generative AI and predictive AI, and makes the point that predictive AI cannot work, not because AI can't work with it, but because predicting human behavior in the future is intrinsically difficult or almost impossible. So AI is not going to do that if we can't. And I mean, the book itself is really interesting because it makes a lot of case studies of where things have gone wrong and why it's not always AI to blame, but our use of it, our reliance on it, with that we think it can do things that it cannot.
I mean, that's such an interesting point. And once upon a time, 20 years ago or so, my good buddy Michael Backus put me in touch with Michael Crichton when he was working with him on his novels. And Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park. And when I was making my documentary Sizzle, we spent about 4 months trading about 50 emails back and forth. And one of the things, and Karen, this is relevant to you, was it was early on, Crichton had said in one of these emails that you got to keep in mind, no human can ever predict the future. And you'll never get a climate modeler to say those words. They are so believing in their climate models that, yeah, I know that's kind of maybe true, but these models are so powerful that they can tell us what I know, but still no human can. And he went on and on about that. And that's a little bit of what you're saying there is there's a human tendency to believe, yeah, but if we make these things that sophisticated, we can finally, you still can't predict the future with it. Hey, Nancy, are you there? Did you want to share one comment with us? What you were typing something in there? Or are you away from the machine?
Might be away from keyboard.
Yeah. Okay. And we got 5 minutes left. Yeah,
Randy, I
Julian,
wanted to,
Julian, yes,
yeah,
everybody, this is my tennis buddy Julian, who is commercial real estate guy and also starting a podcast that he did an excellent job in an episode with me that we recorded a couple weeks ago. And so yeah, go for it, Julian.
yeah. So I use AI a lot in my day-to-day, but what I noticed is that the data is really the important thing. The data in the LLM really will change your experience, right? Especially if you're trying to build decks, especially if you're trying to pitch people, especially if you're trying to take relevant data. If you have data that's not on market, especially for real estate, for example, you need to have strong data sets. And without that, it's a large waste of time. So, one thing that I've noticed is that in creative circumstances where you have to influence and do other things, AI isn't as strong in that. And I think that that's going to change when the data becomes stronger, when the data sets become as strong as maybe the AI is. So that's what I'm noticing,
Yeah,
at least to
yeah.
the space.
Well, and Charles, do you agree with? I mean, this is really what comes out of a lot of the AI proponents is that all of these things will continue to change. They're going to continue to get better, right?
Yeah, but Julian's point about data is absolutely true. And it's well known in the machine learning world that if you want to improve your outputs, tweaking the model to a new architecture will get you 1 or 2%, and cleaning your data set gets you 10%. So that's absolutely true. And it would be interesting to see as more and more data that's being fed into the computers as training data it is coming from computers, has been auto-generated,
Yeah.
then what does that do to the whole shift, the whole distribution of data? I'm very curious to see what happens there.
Julie, oh, Peter, yeah, you were pointing your finger. Oh.
Madness. When computers cannibalize computer thought, they will go mad. And so even as these tools become significantly stronger and better, the data set is going to become worse and worse because it'll be interpenetrated with other AI that's already in there with its fake ideas that aren't based on a world of gravity.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to summarize what just happened here, which is we ran this discussion for 6 solid months, and AI was maybe 10 to 20% of the subject matter that we talked about. Now coming back after a month away, good God, this was an entire hour taken over by AI. What is going on in the world? And I'm sure we could go another 2 hours from this point onward. But let's wrap it up. And then Matthew, who we got? Lisa next week is going to be our spotlight guest. Is that correct?
Actually, I believe it's going to be Randall just because of scheduling.
Okay, Randall, and give us a little preview of coming attraction with Randall. We're getting ready to work with his. Yeah, tell us a few words on Randall.
So Randall Julian, he is a CEO of a company, Indigo Bio. They're a medical automation company. And he took the first round of the ABT mini course, and he said it was the first time any of this narrative stuff has ever clicked for him. He's read all about the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. He's gone through all these different story models, but it was finally when he got to this like kind of atomic level of the ABT that suddenly everything clicked. Not only is he running the ABT mini course for his management team next week, he's been training his own his own AI models on the ABT to help them as a company kind of punch up and narratively strengthen their papers. And he believes that the ABT is going to be a big fundamental part of being used as a thinking tool for their management team. So this goes to our theme of more than just a communication tool. He wants to use the ABT as a thinking tool, and he has a lot to say on that subject matter.
And this is so fascinating. We toss this stuff out there, and we're in this selection process where the vast majority of people look at, oh, 3 words, okay, that's cute. And then we get people like him that just instantly light up. And I mean, other folks that are nightingales, right, Andy? I use that endlessly now. That was the starting point with Andy talking about the nightingale as this bird that knows how to sing this song but can't sing it until the bird hears it for the first time. And his starting discussion with me was he said, I've known this ABT thing my whole life. I just haven't heard the song sung. And suddenly when I started reading these things, I got it. So, wow, this is a great discussion. Okay, thanks very much. We can keep going. We will keep going next week. Everybody come back next week and let's keep it going. Thanks. Okay, awesome.
Again.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.